Welcome back to another week of Trojan Dash. I'm your host, Reagan Griffin, and as always, I'm joined by Nathan Ackerman, the man, the myth, the legend himself. Nathan, how are we doing today, man?
We got a pretty busy show this week. I'm excited for that. I'm also excited. I was just talking about this. I got this sweet background to go on all of our future Trojan dashes now. I feel like it was a little bland in the past, but now we got this thing spiced up.
Yeah, man, you're doing it up right now with the banner, man. I see you. I see you throwing a little sprinkle of swag in there. Let's go ahead and hop into it. Like you said, we got a busy show starting with what I think is a very exciting development, not just for USC but for college football in general. The partnership that USC announced with JS1 to create Boulevard Studios. It's going to be a branding agency, kind of allowing these athletes, specifically the football players, to utilize the platforms that they've garnered through their using their skill set to learn how to navigate, being a star, learn how to navigate using your name, image, and likeness. Nathan, what do you think this means for the future of recruiting, for the future of college football in general, and for the future of USC?
I think it's huge. I mean, I think NIL is the future of the recruiting game, and this obviously comes at a time when the NCAA is still has somewhat tight rules about NIL stuff and student athletes profiting off of their name, image, and likenesses. But they're definitely becoming more lenient heading into the future and heading into January 2021. And I think that USC is incredibly smart in capitalizing on this opportunity because we are in LA, right? And USC is one of the most historic college football programs in the entire country. LA is like the hub of the sports world right now. I think that's pretty impossible to argue with after the Lakers and the Dodgers did what they did. And USC football's got a talented team this year, and the lights shine brighter in Los Angeles, I guess. And I think that this is a very, I guess, aware move on USC's part because it's important for them to adapt to their environment, and I think that they're doing that well. I think it's going to help them out.
No doubt about it, man. It's interesting because it seems like USC is really at the forefront of what's going to be future developments all across college football. Emil, looks like you're in here. How we doing, man? Always good to
So,
see you. But yeah, it seems like one of those things to where USC again, finds itself at the forefront of this. And like you mentioned, they're in Los Angeles. You're around Hollywood. You're around all the superstars. Why wouldn't you be, right? So this partnership, it's really interesting because you look at the USC Instagram. All of the old posts are deleted. They're only going with the new stuff. It's all really kind of aesthetically pleasing. It's the type of thing that I'm not particularly apt with, but from a creative standpoint, it touches the consumer very well. And you have guys like Amon Ron, like Keaton, who have names for themselves beyond USC football, who have established themselves as stars in the football world. And you see them in this video that they put out, doing this cool stuff, and it's exciting to see. And if I'm a recruit, right, and I'm coming up, and I know that these are the advantages that I'm going to have moving forward in the usage of my name, image, and likeness, why wouldn't I strongly consider USC, right? And I think in terms of recruiting, that's only going to help you. Obviously, you got in Craig Navarre. Obviously, you got in Dante Williams. Those guys are good at establishing relationships. But if we're looking at this from a business, which is probably the light that we should have been looking at this thing for in the entire time, considering how much money flows through it. From a business standpoint, USC is separating himself from the rest of the pack very nicely because, again, if you're going to use your name, image, and likeness, you got to know how to do it. And this Boulevard Studios thing, it seems like you're going to allow your athletes to use that very well.
yeah, I kind of want to ask what you think about the long term implications of this because I've heard a lot of the talk with USC specifically and with yesterday's partnership specifically that this is going to change the game for your SC for years to come. It's going to put them ahead of the recruiting landscape. It's going to, I think Helton said in one of those like promo teaser video things, he was like, it's going to put USC on top in the Pac-12. It's going to be like changing the game like a revolutionary thing. And I I don't entirely disagree, but I also don't entirely agree. And the reason why I say that is I don't think that when we look back on this a year from now, USC is going to be the only school with a partnership and with a branding opportunity like this. I think other schools across the country are going to follow suit. I mean, if you're, let's say you're at Oregon, right, and you see SC's doing this big thing, creating Boulevard Studios right now, and that's obviously going to help them out in the recruiting game because guys are going to want to come to a place where they have the opportunity to make some cash while they're at school because, I mean, who wouldn't want that, of course. But I just don't think Oregon's going to, or big schools like that are just going to sit back and say, oh, USC got us on this one. Like they're just that much better than us. I guess we got to count our losses here and go home. I think that this is going to be the kind of thing that starts popping up all across the country, and it's going to be things that all the big schools, Oregon, I mean, with Nike, I think, I mean, what their possibilities there are endless. They already have like the coolest, jerseys in college football, and I think they can only expand on that and, take that and all the different avenues that they can do that I'm not smart enough to think of. But Oregon's, the Alabamas, the LSU's, the Clemson's, the Ohio States, the Notre Dame's, as much as we might hate to say it, the Floridas. I mean, all these big schools are going to be doing the same kind of thing. And I get that SC is in, LA where we are, that presents its own opportunities. But I also think that, take like Alabama, right? They're in Tuscaloosa, okay? It's not exactly New York. It's not exactly Los Angeles, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to inhibit them that much, because I think that branding corporations, marketing agencies are going to go where the potential is. And if you have a school like Alabama, which I think is one of many schools that's going to be pursuing something like this, the opportunities are going to be there no matter where that school is. So I do think that USC is ahead of the curve. I think it might help them out for 1 or 2 years, sort of landing some of those top guys that, realize that they have a real opportunity to make an impact on the whole branding marketing front while they're at school. But beyond that, I don't think this is going to be something that USC can boast over other schools for years to come. I don't think that this is going to be something where it's just USC, right? I think other schools are going to follow suit. And props to SC for doing this, because I think not only is it smart, not only is it, like I said, aware and adaptive, but I think it's also the moral thing to do, right? I think it's only right that these guys can profit off of their brand while they're at school, and I think this is long overdue for the NCAA to sort of adopt. But again, I don't know if it's going to be the difference maker in the long term, because I just think every other school is going to do it too.
I disagree. And the reason I disagree is, I do think that you're right in saying that a lot of schools are going to try to do the same thing. But there is an advantage to being first, right? If you're USC and you're recruiting guys, it's easy to say, well, they're copying what we try to do. We're the first ones here. We were the ones doing this at the forefront. Come with us because we know what we're actually doing here. Not to mention the fact, like we've mentioned, you're in Los Angeles, you're in the city where dreams come true, you're in the city of stars, you're in the city of celebrities. You have the connections out of the behind, and not to mention the fact that you are in USC. When we talk about the connections that happen just by nature of being a USC student and being attached to this organization in this school, of course you have the Reggie Bushes and the Dr. Dre's and the Steven Spielbergs and God knows whoever, or people that are the Nathan Ackermans after you graduate, man. There are stars out the behind. So, I mean, even in the video that they dropped, Matt Leinart was in that. The opportunities are endless. And I think those are opportunities that other schools simply don't have. When we're talking about star power and when we're building a brand, that's essentially what we're talking about, is how do you become more than a football player? How do you become a star and a face and a name, a household brand that people recognize, right? That's what USC does. That's what this school is, right? This is a school that's been a household name across the country for years because of what they've been able to do in that respect. So even though there are going to be other teams and programs that try to copycat, I promise you this, no one's going to be able to do it like USC is. They're first, and they're going to do it damn well. They're going to do it damn well.
I mean, I think that there's a chance that you're right. I just don't know if being first. I mean, okay, let's take a guy that's graduating high school in like 2024, right? And all these schools now have their big branding partnerships, whatever, marketing opportunities in place by now. Alabama's got it, LSU has it, Clemson has it, Oregon has it. Everybody, all the big name schools have it, right? Nobody's going to be drawn specifically to USC because they were doing it first. Now, maybe USC is doing it best. Maybe the fact that they did it first means that they now have sort of worked out the kinks and they know what they're doing and the ball's totally rolling now and everything's going perfect. That's certainly possible, and if that happens, great for SC. But it's going to come down to the specifics of what these schools are actually doing, and the fact that USC is doing it first doesn't mean that they're going to be doing it the best. I think there's a great chance that they do. Again, I think LA certainly doesn't hurt. I mean, as I said, I think schools like Alabama that aren't in as big of markets and as big of, locations that cater to this sort of thing, I think that they're going to figure out a way to get it done. But, I mean, obviously being in Los Angeles is only going to help SC. But, again, I just think it's going to come down to the combination of, the football itself, because these guys are trying to, if we're talking about big recruits that can make money with their brand, they probably have NFL aspirations after school for sure. And it's going to come down to a combination of that. We don't know where the football team is going to be in 2024. It could be national champions. It could be fourth in the Pac-12 South. I'm not even.
Ooh, don't say that. Don't say that.
Okay, third in the Pac-12 South. I'm not even going to try to guess that, but it'll be a combination of that with everything going on with that name, image, and all the NIL stuff and all the branding stuff and all the marketing stuff. And the fact that SC is first doesn't mean that SC is best. Again, it could be that way, but we just have to see. And I think that for the next couple of years, USC might be the best at it. They might be first. They might be the only ones out there because they were first to the party. They were they sort of got the ball rolling. They were there first. They were on the scene first. So I think maybe in the short term the impact's going to be huge, but I just don't know how long that's going to last.
Well, I do want to mention that Mr. Emil Jones mentioned in the chat, he says, I personally don't think this is the way to go. The kids should remain college kids, separate college sports from professional sports. I'm not going to lie. That was a concern of mine when I watched the video. When I watched it, I said, oh, man, are they going Hollywood on us? Are these guys, going to be more of celebrities than they are football players? But you got to realize and you got to remember how much labor has been taken advantage of by the NCAA and how, unfair it is to a lot of these guys that they have to go through the NCAA and put in all this work and put in all this blood and sweat and tears into this and reap no benefits other than the fact that, maybe you have a shot at going to the NFL and you get a college degree. But let's face it, a college degree in this day and age, what does that really get you? Right? Yeah, it's almost like more of a necessity than it is an advantage to go out and make a decent living for yourself, unless you're an entrepreneur of some sort. College degrees, and so many people will tell you that they have bachelor's, master's, even PhD, and it's still a rough go of it out there. So the amount of time, effort, and labor that you put into the NCAA for what you're getting in return, room, board, housing, and a college degree, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So these guys should have the ability, I feel, to capitalize on the social value and social clout that they garner by nature of being attached to the USC football team and make the most of that while they have it. Because unfortunately, the NCAA has proven time and again that they don't care about what these guys get. So at the very least, they should be able to use their name, image, and likeness for themselves. But that's my 2 cents. Let's go ahead and keep it pushing. Let's talk about these running backs, man. These running backs, there's been a lot of buzz about them, specifically Stephen Carr, Marquise Stepp coming out of camp. Clay Helton's had a lot of positive things to say, especially regarding the health of Marquise Stepp and the other guys. Keenan Christian's been a name that's mentioned a lot. Nathan, how do you think this running back room shapes up for the upcoming season, and what impact do you see them having in this air raid offense?
I would say one word: underrated. And the reason I say that is there's no Reggie Bush here. There's no Bijan Robinson. That might be too. Sorry. But the thing that I see about this group is that there's so many different looks, right? You have Stepp, who is not the fastest guy on the planet, sure, but he's massive. I mean, it takes an entire team to take that guy down. Then you got Stephen Carr, right, who is a little bit faster with a little bit less size, and that sort of creates its own advantages as far as the run game goes. Then you got Vaimal Pei, and he's a little bit faster, a little bit smaller, so he sort of has. He sort of leans a little bit more toward the other side of the spectrum, where you have Keenan Christian, who just flies, and the guy's physical, but his game is his speed, right? So you have Stepp on one side, you got Keenan on one side, and then two guys that are, at equal points along that spectrum, and you have four different looks that can keep opposing teams on their feet, and they're never going to know what's coming because you take Stepp, right? You pound him up the middle for like 15 yards. It takes 10 guys to tackle him. Then Keenan Christian bursts to the outside and picks up 22, and it's just that over and over and over again. Especially when you have the wide out group that this team has with Keaton Slovis too. There's going to need to be a fair amount of tension on the passing game, which means all of a sudden Stephen Carr or Vaimal Pei burst past you for like 12 yards, right? And it's just that, like I said, over and over and over again. So I'm normally anti-committee. I think that it's usually smartest to just take your best guy and have him sort of share the brunt of the workload, I guess. But in this case, when you have four guys that are, I would say, about equal in skill, and they're as different from each other as they are, it's just going to create so many different looks that I think it's going to take 3 quarters for opposing defenses to adjust to, and by then it's going to be like,
I think you said it best when you mentioned how, great these wide receivers are. And I hate to make this about the wide receivers, and I'm not going to make it about the wide receivers. This is about the running backs. But let's not fool ourselves. The running backs in this air raid, it's called the air raid for a reason. You're going to be passing the ball a lot. Keaton Slovis is going to be throwing 40, 50 times a game. But they're going to be one hell of a supplement. And what I mean by that is when you spread out as much as USC does, and when you have the receiving talent that USC has, you're forced to take guys out of the box. And, essentially what the box is, that's the defensive line and the linebackers for the people who might not know out there. And when you take guys out of the box to go cover the people on the perimeter, you leave a wide open matchup, right? Because usually you'll have around 7 to 8 guys in the box if you're a defense that likes to load the box. And you have 5 guys blocking those 8 guys. So you're going to have people making tackles. But now if I force you to have 6 guys in the box and now I have 5 guys to block those 6 guys and leave my running back in a one-on-one matchup, I like my odds a lot better than if I was loading the box. So I think they're going to be one hell of a supplement. I like the fact that you mentioned how diverse they are as a group. I think that's important to have a bunch of running backs. And like you said, sometimes you can get into the semantics of, how is it to have one guy versus a multitude of guys? I think it's important when if you're going to go the route of having one guy, like say the NFL, a Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley, that guy has to be very diversely skilled and do a lot of different things. And if you don't, you need guys who can supplement and fill the spaces where they can. And I think that's what USC currently boasts. You mentioned Christian with the speed. You mentioned Carr with the power. I think STEPP with the power. I think Carr and Malapai bring a level of experience that's going to be vitally important for the USC Trojans, not just from a gameplay standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint. You need guys who have been there and done that. They both have been there and done that. So I think their presence is going to be immensely important moving forward. I have very high prospects for this running back core. I don't expect anyone to reach over 1,000 yards by any stretch. I'd be surprised if any guy reaches over 700 yards. But the impact, I think, is going to be more than what you see on the stat sheet. Having the presence there is going to mean a lot for this USC Trojans offense because you can not only pass the ball, no matter how offensively oriented and how pass oriented offense get, you have to be able to establish the run to one extent or another, or else you're going to be a one-trick pony. And that's one thing I know Graham Harrell does not want to be. So I definitely look forward to seeing what they're going to do this season.
Yeah, and one thing Graham Harrell's been saying a lot is that he's not going to try to switch it up too much to sacrifice the team's strengths for unpredictability, right? They're not going to try to come in with an entirely different game plan every single week just to throw defenses off. They're going to do what they do best, and that seems to be passing the ball and catching the ball. In this wide receiver core, this quarterback, the unlimited potential, right? But I don't know if I believe that is going to just abandon the run game totally because of that, right? I think that what he's saying is that, yeah, they're going to utilize the passing game because, right, this passing group is loaded like from every angle you could possibly look at that. But a way to supplement that and a way to make that better is by having a ground attack that can get the job done and that can set that up and sort of just keep it in the back of defense's mind. And that's all that they have to do. I mean, even if they don't kill him for 10 yards every single play, even if they pick up 2, 3, 4 here and there, I mean, they know that this team can run the ball. They know that that's something that this team's going to try to do. And then all of a sudden, Amon-Ra's down the sideline, he burns you for 37. So it's just the amount of different ways this team can attack a defense is endless, right? And there's so many different ways that they can do that, and they all sort of feed into each other to create one product that's greater than the sum.
No doubt about it. It's going to be very incumbent upon Graham Harrell to be pretty creative. And I think that's a guy that we can all acknowledge the fact that he's a pretty creative offensive mind. So it'll be exciting to see what he does with all of these weapons moving forward. So on the note of using weapons, let's talk about the schedule. And I know we've kind of aligned it to where we're going to have our toughest or easiest to toughest. Do you want to go toughest to easiest or easiest to toughest? I feel like easiest to toughest.
Yeah, let's go easiest.
All right, I'll put the ball in your court, man. Starting from, we only got 6 games to work with here, but give me your easiest to toughest on the USC schedule starting now. Go ahead.
Easiest, number 6, is got to be Arizona. I mean, yeah, they're on the road. It's the first road game of the season. What does home field advantage really mean this year, though? I think Arizona is probably the weakest team in the Pac-12 South. That game should be a cakewalk. Next easiest, I've got Colorado. We got a home game, which, I mean, I kind of just said that home field advantage doesn't matter, but at least they'll be staying at home. They don't need to go travel, whatever. It certainly can't hurt. Colorado's not a great team. I think the only reason the USC-Colorado game was close last year was that it took USC a little bit to adjust to the altitude, and once they turned it on in the fourth quarter, that game was pretty much over. I mean, a lot of that was Michael Pittman Jr., and he is gone, but USC has guys that can play that role for this year. I got Washington State, the third easiest, fourth toughest game. I think Washington State has really taken a few steps back in the last couple of years. I don't know, a home game again for what that's worth. If anything, I guess that game should be kind of a cakewalk. Number 3, I've actually got Utah, and this I think is where it gets kind of interesting because Utah they were good last year, right? But then they lost Zach Moss, they lost Tyler Huntley, and the defense I think toward the end of the season exposed itself as not being that great, and I think that's something that USC can kind of expose, and I think they've obviously had their troubles traveling to Salt Lake the last few years. I think it's like 3 or 4 straight games. The Trojans have come up short there, but I'm saying that'll end this year. I think the Trojans come out with a victory there. Number 2, rivalry games are always tough for me. We saw that in 2018 when I think USC they went 5-7 last year. The team was not great, but they were clearly better than UCLA. And the atmosphere just kind of got to them. Obviously, the atmosphere won't be the same this year without fans, but the rivalry game is a rivalry game. I think UCLA has talent. I don't think they're going to be very good, but I think in any rivalry game against a team that is at least somewhat competent is going to be a tough one. So that actually, I think, is going to be the second toughest game for the Trojans. But there's a big drop-off after number 1 in terms of difficulty of opponents, and that first game is Arizona State. I've talked a lot about how I think that one could present the Trojans some problems based on their tendency to start slow, and I don't know who's going to win that game, to be honest. I don't think USC is going to cover the 10.5-point spread. I could be totally wrong. But as of now, I think that would be my order. And again, I think that if there's one game, I could see the Trojans going 6-0 this year. I think that if there's one game that they lose, it's almost certainly going to be the Arizona State game because I really see them losing any of the other 5.
Interesting. So I'll go ahead and give you mine. Starting with the easiest, I actually think the easiest game is going to be Washington State. I don't have a whole lot of faith in that roster. Obviously, it's a home game. I took a decent amount of, I took notice of when you're traveling. Not necessarily what's a home and away game, but when you got to pick up and move a little bit. I think that's, an underrated aspect of a team going throughout the course of its season. I think going all the way up to Washington, or not going up to Washington, I should say, that poses a pretty good advantage for USC and a disadvantage for Washington State. So I think that'll be your easiest game. I think the next easiest, I'll probably go Arizona. I'm with you. I don't think that roster has a whole lot of juice. I think USC has a ton of juice. That should be a pretty self-explanatory, even though it is an away game. That should be in and out. Clean your hands. That should be one of the games that you really make a statement, drop 50-something points, make a statement to the college football committee that you're here and you're ready to roll. Next easiest, I will say Colorado for similar games that you said, or similar reasons that you said. I do think Colorado poses somewhat more of a threat than you said, but they're a team that kind of puts out a decent team every year. They're not going to get rolled over, but from a talent standpoint, they just don't hold a candle to USC. The next up, I'm actually going to put – this was tough for me. I'm going to put Arizona State there. And I think Arizona State is a tough game, but I look at this USC roster, and given everything that's happened and given how much they wanted to play, I think they come out week 1 coming out of the gates hard. I think they blow Arizona State out of the water. And your next toughest game, I'll say, is Utah, because I think that's a trap game. I think that's one of those games. You are traveling, like I said. You're going somewhere you're unfamiliar. You got to go through the ordeal of getting on a plane and doing all that stuff. And Utah always puts out a good roster. And granted, they lost their starting quarterback and starting running back last year, but that's a team that's never going to go easy. And because you're going through everything, and because it's week 3, a lot of teams, I feel like, or a lot of people have those Arizona or specifically the Arizona State games circled on the schedule. Anytime you have a game circled on the schedule, that's when you're going to come out hard. But it's the games that you don't have circled where the other team has it circled. That's when you got to worry about it. So I do think that Utah, I'm going to sit up here and say that Utah is going to beat USC by any stretch, but I think Utah is going to come out with something to prove, and USC might not have as much to prove in that game, which might pose a threat to them for a quarter or two. Finally, I will say your toughest game is UCLA. It's the end of the season. You went through the ordeal of the season. I think Torian Thompson-Robinson has a little more juice than we've seen. I think this is the year that he takes the next step from being, an all right quarterback that still was pretty raw into being a pretty polished quarterback. I think this is when we start to see the evolution of Dorian. So I will say that that's probably your toughest game because it's a rivalry game. You are going into the Rose Bowl. We don't know if I don't think there's going to be fans, right? They're not allowing fans in stadiums, but it's still a different environment. You don't have to travel, but I think UCLA is a team that's going to come out definitely with something to prove. It's the end of the season. Knowing UCLA, they probably wouldn't have had that good of a season up to that point to begin with. So this is something that they're going to be hanging their hat on. So I think that'll be your toughest game this year. But again, we've talked about this in the past. I don't think any of these games really pose all that much of a threat, man. And that's the sad part is that the college football committee is just simply not going to acknowledge anything that USC's accomplished this season because none of these teams are frankly all that good.
Yeah, but I mean, you kind of touched on this for, a bit back there. You said a lot of these games are statement games, right? And I think some of these games are going to be tougher than others, but to me, they're all equally important because this is a team with, I think, college football playoff aspirations. I don't know if it'll happen, but that should definitely be the goal. I think winning the Pac-12 South should be expected. Winning the Pac-12 championship is certainly within reach, and this is a team that, if I think things go right, they have a chance to go to the college football playoff, and it's going to come down to those games. It isn't going to come down to whether or not they win the Arizona State game, because obviously if they lose that, they're out. But if they win it, it's an impressive win, even if they beat them by 1 or 2 or 3 points. But it's going to come down to how they did against teams like, the UCLAs or like the Washington States. Because if you have a 4, 5, 6, 7 point game in there, it's not going to look great in a 7-game season. You're going to have to go out and you're going to have to give it to those teams, beat them by, 17 plus points. So the USC really can't approach any games with their guard down, because as soon as they do, and as soon as they barely scrape by with a win that they should have coasted to, it's not going to be.
Exactly. And I think it's one of those things where this team is going to have to approach every single game, not with the intention of playing the opponent, but making an impression on the country as a whole. And that's going to be something that's tough to do. And it's a tough mentality to have because the dude right in front of you, it's hard not to be focused on him in that moment. But if you're Graham Harrell, if you're even Todd Orlando, you have to recognize the fact that your only shot at even possibly making the college football playoff is by going out and making a statement for 6 consecutive weeks that this team is far and above away from the rest of the Pac-12. That's the only shot that you have. And even then, I'm not sure it'll be enough, man.
I don't know. We'll see. It'll be an interesting season. I don't even want to predict at this point.
Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and move into our last topic of the day. State your case. It's a solemn case for me, man, but one that I felt it was necessary to make. This is going to be my last week with Trojan Dash. It was a decision that was kind of tough for me to make because I do enjoy doing the show. I enjoy doing it with you, Nathan. It was something that, initially I wasn't like too keen on just because I wasn't really into college football like that. I'm more of an NFL guy, but Sam came to me with the opportunity. If you guys don't know Sam, you probably don't because you don't see him on camera, but he's the guy doing everything behind the scenes, making this thing run as smoothly as it does. And he came to me with the opportunity, and that's a guy that I have a great deal of respect for. And if he said this is going to be something that he was really confident in, you bet your behind I was going to be right there with him, helping him along the way. But we're pretty deep into it now, and I found that I'm pretty consumed with a lot of different things going on, so I have to kind of prioritize things. So this is going to be my last week with the show. It's been one hell of a ride, but this is going to be the last case that I state in, is that if you're a fan of this show, even if you're a participant, if you're a host, anyone who has any sort of attachment with Dash Sports, buy the stock and keep buying the stock while it's low, because it's going to get high very, very soon. I have the utmost faith in everyone that I work with directly, that I work with just by nature of being a host, and they're hosting other shows. I've been keeping tabs on the other shows, and the development that a lot of those guys have had over the course of their little time doing these shows, I think has been very remarkable. I think this is something that's going to take off, man. I love the articles that y'all are doing on Sports Pac-12. All of that stuff is so exciting to watch. And I know Sam's a dude that's going to grind and work hard to make this thing happen. I know that you're a guy that's going to grind and work hard. Everyone that's attached to Dash is grinding and working hard. I have the utmost respect for all of y'all, and it's exciting to see where y'all are going to take this thing, man.
I just want to say to everyone listening, if you've been, tuning in this week or in any of the previous weeks, you've been unsure whether you want to hop in the chat, do so right now. Show some love for this man right here. Reagan, it's been real working with you, sir. You brought out the best in me. I've had an awesome time. This has been memorable for me, and I hope it's been for you as well. And when I started this thing, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I still feel like I don't really know what I'm doing, but you've definitely guided me along that.
Man, you're great, man. You're great at what you do, man. No doubt about it.
You too, man. You got it. You have a future.
I appreciate that. Emil, I know it's tough, man. I see it in the chat, but I got to do what I got to do. I appreciate all the love, man. You've been the most loyal fan of this show without a shred of a doubt, than, beyond the respect. So much respect to you. Much love to you. I wish you the best, man. You'll see me around doing other things. That's for sure, man. And who knows, maybe opportunities come in the future where I'm able to be a guest on Trojan Dash. So hopefully you'll see me again. But, for the last time, I'm going to have to sign off. Thank you guys so much. That'll do it for this week's episode of Trojan Dash. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you go check out the socials. I was never good at this, but let's see if I can get it this last time. Go check out the socials at Dash Sports TV. That's on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And then go check out the website, dashsports.tv. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.